Retainer clients can sometimes demand more work than they're paying for. And in this video, I'm going to show you a Monday.com setup to prevent that entire issue. So you can see the time allocated per retainer client and also the amount of time worked per month for that particular retainer client. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We'd love to help. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of my example Monday.com system. Now, as I've already mentioned, retainer clients can sometimes take liberties, right? So what we want to do is we want to set up a process within Monday where your team can log time against a retainer project. We log the expected amount of time or agreed amount of time that you would work on a monthly basis for a retainer project. And then we want to see the actual amount of time worked on that retainer project. Then we can work out the difference. Then we can highlight if someone is asking or someone's getting excess attention, someone's demanding more than they're paying for. This would be a way of doing that within Monday.com. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is create a new board. And this is going to be our projects board. This board here is where we're going to manage all of our retainer projects. And I'm going to keep this super simple for the sake of this video, but obviously you can expand on this. So board name, projects, privacy options can either be main, so accessible by everyone, private, only you and select individuals can go on this board, or shareable. If you'd like to share your projects board externally, you are more than welcome to. And then we can go ahead and select what we're managing in this board. Of course, in this instance, it's going to be projects. And then we just go ahead and press create board. Awesome. So once this then populates, I'm just going to run through some absolute basics on the project side of this. First and foremost, we just want our different groups. Each group should indicate a different stage of the project. So often you would have new projects, and this is just an example. Again, this can be customized to your business. We then have active projects, because once they're new, they then become active. We'll then have completed projects, because ultimately we want them to be completed. And then we might have cancelled or postponed. So cancelled / postponed projects. And then we go ahead and hit enter. So now I'm just going to sort out the colors. So I'll make that red. Completed will be green to indicate that it's done. And then new projects we can put in the gray here. Now the next thing we want to do is use this status column just on the left hand side. And the status column should match the groupings as well. So new projects is going to be in gray. Then we've got active, which is obviously the purple there. We go ahead and select a nice purple option. And then we got completed. And then we would have, using the red up the top, cancelled / postponed. And hit enter. And then you can just reposition this accordingly. This is quite simple to do. So now we've kind of got literally the very basics of project management within Monday.com. We have got a date column as well. So you might choose to use this as the date created. You can then restrict the column editing. And then what we probably also do is add another date column. And then this date column is going to be date completed. And then we can go ahead and we can restrict the column editing. And then we go ahead and use a formula column and we can work out the difference between date created and date completed. Give me the difference between date created and date completed. Hit enter. And this will give us the amount of time it takes to close a particular project. But in your instance, because it's retainers, this will allow you to work out the average amount of time someone stays on as a retainer client. Thus, you can forecast how long it takes, or on average, you can take all of your projects or all of your retainers and then work out an average, and then like your average revenue per client, the time in which they churn, like you can work all of that out. So I would call this TTC, and then I would hide the column summary again, restrict the column editing. And then we can go ahead and restrict the column editing. Cool. So now we've got date created, date completed, time to close, and then the status columns. We just need to set up some basic automations now, just to accommodate for everything that we have kind of walked through on here. Then we can get into the more like, I don't know, fancy stuff, I guess. So if we go to automate, top right hand corner, go to manage, and then create automation. What we firstly need to do is when the status changes to whatever it changes to, it needs to move to its respective group. So when status changes to new, move item to group new. Again, same principle applies for all of the other status options. Fortunately, there are not that many in this video, but it can become quite painful to get this set up if, if there are like 10 status options. 10 different groups. So when status changes to completed, move item to group completed. And then when status changes to cancel / postponed. There we go. Move item to group. Cancelled / postponed. Awesome. And then just press create automation. Now, what we also want to do is automatically populate the date created and also the date completed. So date created is going to be when an item is created, set date to today. When item is created, set date to today. So every time a new project or retainer client is added to your Monday.com board, which could come in from Monday Sales CRM, or if you're using another CRM system, it could be integrated. So when the status is changed to close one, it automatically creates a new retainer client on your project's board or retainers board inside of Monday.com, tracking the start date. And then also we just want to track the completed date. So I would just use the when status changes to completed. It's going to move item to group completed projects and set the date completed to today as well. So that status column or the status changes the trigger for the date being completed. So that's just helpful information. This is the absolute basics. Okay. Now, some additional stuff that you might want to go ahead and add. You might have, let's say, a files column. And this could be your project files. So if you do store files, so project files, or what I would typically recommend doing is I wouldn't necessarily host the files inside of Monday.com, but I would link the client folder or the project folder to the Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever you choose to be using. So we've got our project files there. We could then go ahead and add a label, which is essentially just a status column. And this could be, let's say, the retainer type. So the retainer type could define the number of hours for this particular engagement. So we could go retainer type, and let's go with that philosophy. Okay, so you don't have to, it's up to you, but let's say it's type 1. So let's just say cheap package. Then we go medium package. I don't know. Again, don't use these terms for marketing purposes. And then we go expensive package. Expensive package. Cool. So we've got our different retainer types here, as you can see. I can then select between whichever one that this particular project is. Again, that can pull over from your CRM system. If you're tracking that, I guess you probably would be as well. So now what I want essentially to happen is if they are a retainer package that is the cheap package, I want to say, well, we are only willing to accommodate 20 hours for this particular package per month. So one person can really only work 20 hours on this engagement, as opposed to the expensive package, which might be 100 hours, for example. So quite often you'll find that the cheaper people want more time and the expensive people don't need as much time as they've purchased, which again, that's a conversation for another day. But what we want to do is automatically set the allocated time per month, which is what we're going to do using a numbers column. So we're just going to say allocated time per month, hit enter. And then I'll make this a little bit bigger just so we know what we're talking about here. Hide the column summary, and then I'll probably just restrict the column editing as well. And then I'm going to say when item is created, or we could just do when status changes, but when item is created, and only if, let's say status being retainer type is equal to cheap package, then set number 2, and we're going to set number 2, and the numbers column is going to be allocated time per month, and the value for the cheap package is 20 hours. So realistically, we don't actually want our team working more than 20 hours a month for the cheap package. Now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this exact formula or recipe, and then I'm going to change it to our medium package. Let's say that's, and then I'm just using examples here, let's say that's 50 hours, and then if it's our expensive package, it's going to be 100 hours as an example. So then duplicate again, expensive, going to be 100 hours. Now, alternatively, if you don't want to use this setup, you can literally just have the numbers column and manually enter in the information like I would here. So let's say it's 50. But I just think it's helpful to kind of bundle this so you know, roughly speaking, per month, the amount of hours that are worked should not exceed whatever the case may be, 50 or 30 or 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set this column as required, and then we'll create a new project. So I'll call this example project, and then I'm going to go ahead and select my retainer type as the medium package and just press create project. So now it's going to go ahead and create the project, which it has done here, and then it's automatically populated the allocated time per month based on the retainer type that we selected. Again, I'll just delete these, and then I'll go ahead and create another one just so we're all clear. So example project number 2, retainer type being expensive package, create project. That's going to auto populate the allocated time per month as being 100 hours. Cool. So now we need a means of logging the amount of time that has actually been worked against this particular retainer project or against this retainer this month, which brings me on to stage 2. So we need to go ahead and create a new board. Now, this board I'm going to call time submissions. The idea being that your team will submit time submissions against a particular project, and then we'll calculate the amount of time within that particular month. Let's see what happens. And look, I'll walk you through it all. So again, board name time submissions, privacy entirely up to you. And then I'm just going to put time submissions in here. Cool. And then go ahead and press create board. So I'll keep this quite basic. I've done another video on time tracking within Monday.com anyway, so a very similar setup to what we're going to have to do here today. That will probably have a bit more detail to it. Essentially, what we want is one group, all time submissions, hit enter. We don't need the status column. We can go ahead and delete that. And then what we want is 2 date columns. So I'll delete the files column as well, as we don't need that. We might not need the person column either. Now, this is where it gets a bit further interesting, more interesting. I mean, interesting might not be interesting to you, but you can work out the cost per employee who is submitting the time. That's when this whole project thing gets slightly more sophisticated, because as opposed to using allocated time per month, you might select allocated cost per month. I'll come on to what that means in a moment. We might even be able to cover both of these in this video today. But let's just say that this date column is our start date / time. And then click in, press a 3-dotted button, go to settings, customize, and just say show time by default as well. So now when I select that, it will show me 24th of August at 9 a.m. And then I'm going to go ahead and add another date column. And this is going to be called end date / time. Cool. And then I'm going to go ahead, click in. And what we want to do is 3-dotted button, settings, customize date column, and just say show time by default. So now if I click in, say the 22nd, or I don't know what day are we on, the 22nd today. And then I'll change this to, let's say, 10 a.m. So there's an hour difference between my start date and time and my end date and time. So now I want to work out the difference in time between the start date and time and the end date and time. So what we go ahead and do is add a formula column, and this formula column, we can either, and now I'm going to test this. Let's just write it in first. I've already got the formula, but let's just see. Give me the difference in time between start date / time and end date / time. If this doesn't work, I've already got the formula anyway. That is not it. So this is the formula, days, and then end date / time, start date / time times 24. That's the formula we want to use. So hours worked. Okay, that's essentially all that is. So if I then go ahead and hide the column summary, and then I'll go ahead and restrict the column editing as well. If I then change this to 11:30 as an example, that will update to 1.5 hours worked, right? So now we've got the absolute basic setup here. Your team can submit time, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And then what we want to do is we automatically want to associate, or we want to be able to connect our time submission to the retainer project that they were working on. So we go ahead, and what we want to do is we want to add a connect boards column. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and connect the boards, select boards, and then we're going to connect to our time. So connect to our projects board, and then we want to go ahead and press create a 2-way connection. So this will connect our time submissions to our projects, and in this instance, it will always be singular. And then if we go to our projects board, you will see that there's an association to time submissions, and we can see all of the time submissions associated with this retainer project on all time. Okay, that's the caveat here, of all time. So now what we want to do is we want to get a little bit more sophisticated. Is we want to add another formula column, and we want to say, give me the hours worked only where the start date / time is this month, is in this month, is this month. There, that's what we want, is this month, right? Cool. So what we're essentially saying is we want to know if this formula, well, what we want to know really is the number of hours worked, but within the month that we're currently in. That accounts for our retainer projects, okay? The problem you'll have is you'll have total number of hours worked, but that would be total number of hours worked of all time when all the time submissions are associated with that particular project. So imagine you've got 6 months worth of retainer work and all of the time submissions associated with that particular retainer. It's going to calculate the all-time hours worked. So instead, by applying this formula, it will only give us the hours worked this month. So you go hours worked this month. And then what we want to do is we want to roll up this column onto our projects board. So we go ahead and add a mirror column. So we're going to mirror over data from our time submissions board. And then we want to mirror over the hours worked this month. Then I'm going to go ahead and associate that first time submission. So this is the time submissions this month. So time submissions this month. So now you can see 1.5 hours has been worked this month for this particular retainer project, because obviously we need to factor this in on a monthly basis. So this would then reset when the month ends or when the new month comes into play, like when September starts, for example. So if I then move this to the 23rd of July, obviously that was last month. So the result it's going to give me is 0. So we're not fussed about last month, we're just fussed about this month. How much time has been worked on this particular retainer project against the allocated time for this retainer project on a monthly basis. So now I've got my allocated time per month, and then I've got my time submissions this month for this particular retainer project. What I can do is I can go ahead and add a formula column, and I can work out the difference between the two. Give me the difference between allocated time and time submissions this month. I think I've kind of messed up the column names and also spelt some things wrong, but hopefully the AI works out. It has a time remaining. Cool, there we go. This month. Yeah, this month. So we can see now how much time is remaining for this particular retainer this month. Right, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're making some progress. So we've got time submissions for this month, allocated time per month, time submissions this month, and then time remaining this month. Now, next thing that we want to do is obviously just handle submissions coming in. So we've got a couple of options. We can either use the monday.com form itself. So you can share this form within the realms of your team. We can go ahead and edit this form. So we create a form up the top left-hand corner here. And then we just want to allow us to mess around. We want to add this as a required column on the monday.com form. So we've got name of the time submission. Let's just make this required. So they have to give a name. They have to give us a start date / time and also include the time, and then an end date / time, and they have to include the time as well. And then also they have to show the project. Now I must warn you, when I did this video, I think it was earlier this week, this form thing didn't work at all. This project setup should allow users using the monday.com form to select the project associated with the time submission. It did not work. We used super forms instead, but let's see if it's going to work today. It would allow us to make the selection. It just then wouldn't populate on the board itself. So if we go to our main table, you can see that we've got these 3 submissions. Let's keep the first one. We'll delete the other 2. So I'll just call this example time submission. Example time submission. And then we can select our start date and time. So that would do, yeah, short, whatever time it is now. And then end date / time at 8:56, 57, whatever. And then I can select which project this relates to, or which retainer it relates to. One thing to note on here, and I'll come on to it, as you can see at the moment, I can select multiple projects. We wouldn't want to allow that. So that's just a quick change. If we go back to our time submissions board, go to our connection column, go to settings, customize, and just unselect allow linking to multiple items. So then you can only link to one project when you're submitting a time submission. So let's go ahead and press submit. We'll see if it works. I don't know. It doesn't look like it has, unfortunately. You can see here that the project association has not worked at all. The nice thing is that this information has populated. So as you can see, this hasn't worked, unfortunately. Bit frustrating. Monday.com, you really need to do a better job. Don't roll out features if they're not going to work. Anyway, seeing as the form's not going to work, we're going to use Superforms. Superforms is a third-party app on the app marketplace within Monday.com. To get to the app marketplace, just go to Options, Power Ups, App Marketplace, and you're looking for a platform called Superforms. It's usually down here, recommended for you anyway. It's the most popular app on the app marketplace. You can go ahead and search Super, and I'm sure it will populate. As you can see, it has. Superforms is what we want to use. Just go and download it in or add it to your Monday.com system. And then once you have, go to the plus button in the top left-hand corner, just like we did when we were adding a form, go to apps, and then we want to go ahead and use Superforms instead. So it's literally identical. It just works instead of Monday.com rolling out features that don't work. I mean, it's very poor from their development team to do that. I mean, I'm giving them a bit of a hard time, but you see what I mean. So now you've got the time submissions, you've got all of the questions, so we can go ahead and hide the person. We want the start date and time to be required. We want the end date and time to be required. We want the name to be required. You can click in here just on the start date and time and just say allow time selection and do exactly the same for the end date / time, allow time selection. We can hide hours worked, we can hide hours worked this month, and we can hide the update function as well. And then we can go ahead and just preview this form. You will see now the form is pretty much identical. You set start date and time. So there we go, 12 a.m. I'm going to select maybe not 12, let's say 7 a.m. And then we can select this one here and click in, and then let's say this is 8 a.m. so that's 8:05. Let's say 1 hour and 5 minutes difference. Example time submission, and then we can go ahead and use the drop down menu and select the project that this is associated with and just go ahead and hit submit. So that's going to create a new time submission record. So from now on, you'll use that form for your team. They will always submit time through that particular form whenever they work on any retainer project within your business. That then calculates the hours worked, it associates with the project automatically, and then also works out the hours worked this month for that particular project. We can then go to the projects board. We can see the time submissions worked this month, so how much time has been worked this month, how much allocated time per month, and then the time remaining for this particular retainer project per month. Now, obviously, we've got 100 hours here, which is ridiculous. Imagine if we only had 10. We can now see that it's 7.5-ish hours remaining. Imagine if we only had 2 hours for this particular retainer project. You can now see we are minus, okay? So we've got our time submission sorted. We've got our project set up. I'm then going to go ahead and add a nice little feature, which is conditional coloring within Monday.com. Now, conditional coloring will allow me to identify the time remaining this month and will highlight in a color of my choosing, dependent on where we are in relation to the allocated time per month. So let's just say if the time remaining is equal to or less than 5 hours, as an example, then I want to go ahead and make this bright red, like I want to know about it, because this is now obviously becoming an issue. So that's just not saved for whatever reason, but we'll go ahead and create that again. So 3-dotted button, conditional logic, we want to go for the red when the time remaining is equal to or less than, and I think we said 5, did we not? Then we go ahead and press save to this view. So then we could go ahead and add another one, which is what I would recommend doing, say add new condition, and then we use amber warning this time, and then time remaining is equal to or less than 10. There we go. It would be in amber. Or would that work? Does that make sense? Is equal to or less than. I'm just trying to think. Is between, you could go for is contains. Can you reposition this from priority wise? Yeah, you can. So if it's less than 10, yeah, okay, I see how this works. So if it's less than 5, so if it's less than, so if I go 10, yeah, okay, cool. So the positioning, I actually didn't know that. So the position indicates how this would work. And then we could add another condition, and then let's say if it's below 0, so time remaining is equal to or less than 0, then we're going to put a dark or a black on there to indicate that this is a terrible client. So save to this view. Let's see if this works. So we go 0. There we go. So we can see now that this is an issue. This ultimately, what I'm trying to get at here in this video, right, and I probably rambled on quite a lot, is you have your retainer projects. You have an agreed deliverable, and the deliverable is time, maybe, or is associated with time per month. You then have your time submissions. You want to log the amount of time submissions associated with that particular retainer project. The idea being that we can then see the time remaining this month. And if there are clients that are constantly going over the time allocation, or if there are clients that are constantly going over the time allocation, then you can prevent that using these features here. But if you're not logging the time, you don't know which clients are taking up more time and or less time, so it's impossible to know. Now, the advanced version of this would be to begin to calculate your cost as well. Now, that would be based on the person associated with the time submission. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown, but I'm not going to go through it in this video. Essentially, what would happen is, let's say I am a cost to the business of $50,000 a year. What you would do is take the annual cost to the business of an employee, divide it by 2,000, provided that they're full-time. So 50,000 divided by 2,000 gives you $25 an hour. That is then the hourly rate for that particular employee as cost to business. So then you go ahead on your retainer projects and put in, like, as opposed to allocated time per month, you can say allocated cost per month, then work out the cost per employee per time submission. And then what you can go ahead and do is, as opposed to doing it by time, you could do it by cost. That would probably be a more accurate depiction of what's going on with your retainer project, because obviously if your most expensive employee is doing the most amount of time on a retainer project, that needs to be factored in. Whereas if it's like, if one of your employees has worked 20 hours on a retainer project, but they're an intern and they cost $5 an hour or whatever the case may be, then, it's like, is that the end of the world? So cost might be better, but time allocation to start with, then you can begin to look at cost as well. Cost might be slightly harder to just work out based on your retainer packages as well, because obviously we said if it's the expensive package, it's 100. If it's medium, it's 50. If it's cheap, it's 10, or whatever it worked out to be. So I'll leave that with you. The resources are available on my YouTube channel for you to go ahead and work that out if you would like to. But hopefully this video has been helpful. The idea being projects, time submissions, you can see who submitted against what, and then use the conditional coloring to see, have we got 5 hours remaining? Have we got 10 hours remaining? Or, we can add another one if we want to get super fancy. We could go for a green one as well. Put this up the top here and say green, and let's say if equal to, if column time remaining is equal to, or let's say greater than 11, or let's just say greater than 10. Should we say greater than 10? So there's a good buffer, or a healthy buffer there. So then you can see, and you can easily track that information. So if we go 5, it goes red. If we go 1, it goes grey. Grey being very bad. You can choose the colors. Hopefully this video has been helpful. If you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link in the description below. This is stuff we do day in, day out, and we would love to help. So you can apply to book a call with me. We can have a conversation and then work out what's going on from there, whether you'd like to work with us or not. If you have any questions, queries, concerns, or requests, drop a comment in the comment section below this video. I'll do my absolute best to answer those questions, concerns, or requests. If it's a really good question or request, whatever, I will make a video answering it, but it has to be a good one. Anyway, hopefully this video is somewhat helpful, and I'll hopefully see you soon in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.